in malicious compliance with YouTube's end-user license agreement. This is the New World Order Now, coming to you live from the end of the world.
That is correct. We are the New World Order. We are broadcasting to you live from the end of the world. It's the same end of the world that you are living through as well, so I'm sure you feel it just as much as we do. We're excited. You might be experiencing some fear, some panic. I'm here to tell you that that's all justified. I am your host, the Hat Man, and your other host here to also tell you the same message, because we never disagree.
Oh, of course not.
That everything's fine. Your panic is justified. Keep panicking is talking head number 6.
Keep panicking and carry on.
What's that meme? Just relax and
it's keep calm and carry on. It was a slogan in Britain during World War II.
Is that where they get that
from? Yeah,
Okay.
because when the Blitzkrieg and everything was happening, it was their.
I've seen so many deviations of this in memes.
It's become a meme at this point. But no, yeah, the original poster with like the crown on it and everything is actually based off of a World War II positive propaganda campaign by Britain to try to keep everybody falling into the depths of terror.
It strikes me as similar to the instructions for using the oxygen masks in a downing airplane.
Oh, you mean you're going into the whole Tyler Durden thing here?
I am going right in the Fight Club. Hey, just put on your oxygen mask, put your head between your knees, and inhale deeply. Keep calm.
Oxygen gets you high.
Everything's fine. So the more evolutionary pressure that we, as the elites, place upon you, the populace, just keep calm and carry on.
Well,
if you can't make enough,
panicked.
What?
You said to keep panicked.
Yeah, but you gotta. Yeah, you're right. But I guess you have to keep carrying on. I mean, I want you to work.
That's why I said keep panicked and carry on.
Yeah, keep panicked and carry on.
Keep terrored. Keep terrored.
Keep terrored. I think what we want you to do, for example, if you can't make enough money, work harder.
Oh well, yeah, obviously.
And if your property burns down and then the state wants to seize it to build a memorial, just accept it, and they'll pay you a couple $100 to find a new place to live.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's plenty.
That's plenty.
It actually kind of reminds me of Ben Shapiro sat there and said something about like global warming and the sea levels rising, and he's like, well, that's just stupid. Come on, you think these people aren't going to sell their homes and move away? And it's like, sell them to who, Ben? They're underwater. Nobody's going to buy it.
Well, he's thinking like if you have, I guess, precognition that this is going to happen, you'd sell it just before the sea levels rise. Be like, I'm done with the ocean front. We're out of here.
I just like that's the solution. It's just, we'll sell your property. It's like, yeah, I hope fish have money.
Now, here's something that I did hear that's extremely interesting, other than the fact that fish do have money and under the water they don't stink.
Somebody
wrote a song about
underwater,
that.
The fish don't stink. Thank you, Harry Mandel.
I did hear that there's a lot of extremely wealthy people right now, since the beginning of the Ukraine war, that are moving for some reason to Argentina. And I don't remember where I heard that. It may have been a YouTube conspiracy theory rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's
I know, because we all know who went to Argentina.
Well, yeah, it's the whole boys from Brazil thing and all that.
But if you look at the patterns that would occur from a nuclear fallout, according to this thing I was watching, that's one of like the safest zones.
Just because of like the way the tidal flow, the air currents.
Yeah,
Interesting.
A lot of rich people buying up property in Argentina. So I didn't go down it enough, the little rabbit hole that I found, in order to figure out if it was accurate or if there was any validity. Like with most conspiracy theories, I stop where it's fun. So like
stop where it's fun. Once it starts getting like not fun, then yeah, I just
facts. I don't need any of those. When you showed me the Marjorie Taylor Greene Jewish space laser conspiracy theory about starting all the wildfires, I stopped listening right there. I was like, oh, that's fun. Let's believe that.
Yeah.
That's a perfect place to end, I think, right there. So we'll see you next. No, I'm just kidding.
We're just going to put a button on that. It's fine.
So let's dig right into what we wanted to talk about. This is actually a really funny meme that you showed me, has to be a few months ago at this point, that you found. And we tried to have a discussion about this last time we tried to do this. And surprise, we got way too drunk and the recording didn't.
Yeah, it didn't materialize. We were throwing our words around. And the funny thing is, you were telling me that you changed the order of some words, and it became the New Order world. Which, when you're changing the order of the title, it technically is the New Order world.
I guess I should have just kept it and put it up.
Yeah, I mean,
it makes sense.
It's correct.
It's meta.
The New Order world.
The New Order world. Yeah. I mean, it probably would have worked. I should have kept it. But you showed me this meme a few months ago, and I thought this was funny. But then you and I actually had a conversation about it, and turned into a pretty heavy conversation. So I wanted to see if we could bring it up in a podcast and kind of parse it out while we're recording, because there's a lot to get into there. So if you want to go ahead and bring up the meme, this is actually talking about how all of the biggest companies that are in our world today that have the highest profit margins basically offer no goods and services.
Yeah,
I mean, services loosely defined, perhaps.
Sure.
But go ahead and read the meme.
But yeah, so we said there in Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no vehicles. Facebook, the world's most popular media owner, creates no content. Alibaba, the world's most valuable retailer, has no inventory. And Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate.
So, and I've heard this said over and over again, that the consumer has become the commodity. Which is kind of a catch-22 and an oxymoron, because without that advertising revenue from the companies that actually do sell physical products, there is no commodity. But it's interesting that, you know, these companies make way more money than any of the advertisers that are using their space in order to sell their physical goods. That's interesting.
Well, I think one of the stranger things about the entire situation is the fact that despite, like, it's become a situation where we're selling access to each other's things through intermediaries. And there was a comedian who was sitting there, and he was making fun of how the Obama administration sat there and was talking about jobs creation and blah 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 blah. And he goes, there was only one job that was created. It was Uber driver. He said there's like,
but so many people
he said
had to take that job.
Yeah,
it looks like millions of jobs.
Yeah, so he's like, so it's turned into a situation where we all just keep giving each other the same $20 back and forth to get a ride to the airport.
But so listen, in an economy such as we have, after the information revolution, like we had the industrial revolution, and then we had the information revolution.
Yeah, and
now
we're currently in that,
on the precipice of the AI revolution. They're happening closer and closer together. So we're just going to be in the depths eventually of some sort of permanent state of change, which will feel more like a vibration than anything changing. But in the current economy that we have, with fiat currency after the information revolution that the internet brought about, isn't that kind of what our entire economy is pretty much based on anyway? Aren't we just all kind of passing back and forth the same $20, and then it's taxed, and then it's taxed, and then it's taxed. But then they borrow more and put that back out into the market, and then it's taxed. Every time it changes hands, it's taxed, but it's the same $20.
Well, to a certain extent, I would say that it's the people who are at the upper echelons of these companies that sit there and are the only ones who are actually garnering money from it, because they don't have the same amount of expense as they do income, because they're just being like, oh,
Correct.
here, I'm going to give you $20. But the person in the middle, who are these people facilitating the transaction,
The middle management.
yeah, they're sitting there and they're the ones who are actually getting to keep money, because you and I just have to keep giving each other the same $20.
We have to keep giving each other the same $20.
And we're losing money
because
off
every
of that
time
to them
every time it
we make that
transfers,
transfer. Yeah.
Not only is it taxed by the government, but it's also, the
Capitalized
middle
on by-
management
yeah.
that are setting up these companies, which is a really good point that I want to get into. That these companies are created, it seems like it's created by middle management types, which is no good. But here's what I was thinking. You're talking about the people in the upper echelons of these corporate structures. And Rockefeller is very famous for saying, or was it J.P. Morgan, one of the big bankers?
No, yeah,
It
I
might
got
have
you
been
from
Morgan.
the early
From
20th
the
century,
Industrial
yeah.
Revolution, was saying that everybody asked him how he made so much money, and he said, "I didn't make any money. I use other people's money."
Yeah.
So that's how he became rich. Give me your money, I'll turn it into more money. And then he used that in order to gain power, because owning something is not power. And people who don't understand power don't understand this. Ownership is not power. Access is power. So if he has access to all your money, it doesn't have to be his money. He just has to be the person who has access to it.
Well, sure.
So if labor could be considered wealth, I labor, I make jack shit, but this person who has access to millions of people's labor, it's access.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That
No, I
creates the
get
power,
what you're saying.
No,
I can agree with you, particularly in that paradigm. Just
Which is
because, yeah,
interesting.
there's because that's the entire thing, is that whenever you sit there and you hear, I mean, for instance, I don't know if you know about this, because I know you don't really pay attention to the news, and frankly, I
Not
kind
at
of
all.
don't either. But the United Auto Workers are actually probably going to strike, to sit there and try to get wage increases and stuff like that. And the companies, Ford, I think, particular, came out with a statement that the amount that they're asking for, it would be like untenable to sit there and run the company and pay the auto workers that amount.
I don't know
And
about
it's like
that.
the whole
That
thing
might
is,
be true.
Oh no, but my point being,
There's
is
an old saying: if you want to make a fortune in the car industry, you have to start out with a small fortune.
Well, sure. But the funny thing about that to me is that to sit there and be like, oh, well, it's untenable. We can't sit there and run the company like that. It's like, you can't really, because you kind of can't run the company without those people making the cars either. And so you could continue to sell the cars at a slightly lower profit margin and still make billions.
I hear what you're saying.
You know,
and we
so
had this
it's- yeah,
conversation the other night.
It's one of those things where it's like, it's because I'm not one of those like complete bleeding heart people who's like, oh, everybody, it's like no profits should be made, but it's like there's this fine line that they have to run, where they have to remember that it's like labor is a necessity, because like you were saying with access.
Well, I mean,
It's
the
like,
movie.
if
Look at
they
the movie
lose-
Metropolis from the 1910s, 1920s. The silent movie Metropolis. It was talking exactly about that. The mind, the creators, the people who build these structures, have to meet with the hands, the people that actually build them. There's the creator, and then there's the builders. They're two different things, and that's why I find Freemasonry so exemplary as
Exemplary, I believe.
exemplary.
Yeah, exemplary.
Thank you. As a metaphysical structure, is because it's trying to bring both of those things together. And I think that that's an extremely important point of view to have. So you can have the creator, but without the hands, what are you going to do? Do it yourself?
And I almost feel like that's part of what's causing the giant rift between everybody who's on either side of the aisle with these things is the fact that nobody can see things from each other's point of view anymore.
Well, there's no compassion and there's no empathy.
Well, but on top of that, I feel like labor doesn't understand what it takes to run a business, and businessmen don't understand how to labor. Like, and not that,
Sure.
you know, and like you effectively, I mean, you know, I'm not saying that they couldn't build a car, but I mean, it's like they're not utilizing labor properly and not appreciating labor.
Correct.
And labor can't understand what it would take to run the business because that doesn't matter to them because they're not being able to put food on their table.
Right.
They're not being able to pay their rent. And it's like, you have to meet labor's necessities. And I feel like the reason why things keep getting further and further out there with people's opinions towards each other in that structure is the fact that there has to be some kind of middle ground in order for it to actually, the machine to work properly.
I think they're both looking at each other without compassion and empathy, and they're both looking at each other saying, listen, buddy, you don't know how good you have it. Look at what I have to deal with. But they're both saying that to each other at the same time. It's like a mirror.
Yeah, it's very strange because I feel like, yeah, it's a misunderstanding between two groups of people who are just taking the other one for granted.
So, exactly. I agree. So labor is the obvious one to side with because labor has almost no power without a union. The only power that they have is in numbers.
Yeah, and unions have been deteriorating.
Well, Amazon just recently had their first union. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I hear Starbucks was trying to unionize too. I'm not 100% sure how that went, if that was like a company-wide or just in a certain state or something.
I don't know.
I haven't been paying attention.
I know the Amazon one wasn't company-wide, but Russell Brand interviewed this dude who started the first Amazon union locally, grassroots.
Yeah.
And they fucking struck and they negotiated and they won.
Yeah.
So Amazon has their first union, which is awesome. So there is a comeback because I think that the wealth disparity in our country is getting to the point where it's untenable. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. It's a natural phenomenon. It's so natural that you see it in gravity. What has the most gravity is going to draw more towards it and gain more gravity. You know, so it's actually a natural phenomenon for that disparity in a free market to increase. But it gets to the point where the market will collapse
into a black hole, essentially.
Pretty much, if it goes too far. So even Jordan Peterson, who's become very famous, especially lately since he joined Ben Shapiro's outfit, the Daily Wire.
Daily Wire, yeah.
He's become very famous as a alt-right figure, even, you know, more so than when he was simply famous for rejecting forced speech in Canada, which is what he initially became super famous for.
Which I'm in between on that one because I get his point to some extent.
On forced speech or what we were actually talking about?
Oh, the forced speech thing. I don't want to
get too far in the weeds. That's a tangent.
Yeah.
But, you know, so even he will say if things go too far, it's untenable for the system.
Yeah, and I do think that that's absolutely accurate. Meanwhile, it was funny just because, you know, I'm a leftist and all that. It's like when you said the Daily Wire, the first thing that popped in my head was Obi-Wan Kenobi's line from the original Star Wars: "Never will you find a cesspool of scum and villainy," or whatever it was.
Oh man, the guy wears a yarmulke. How dare you?
I know, it's just a terrible human being.
That's downright anti-Semitic, my friend. You need to check yourself.
Yeah, I need to check my privilege.
You really do. Your privilege is showing. It's right here, buddy. So what I was saying was, you know, he even talks about that, and it's easier to side with the point of view of labor. Now, I have started a company, and what really made me appreciate what I had done when I started a small, but successful company.
Sure.
I was able to make a comfortable living off it for many, many years as a photographer. And then I got a little tired of working that hard, and I went back to work for a bigger company on the side. They let me do my own thing when I had, you know, the time to do it, but I worked for them as well. And I had all these young kids that were coming out of art school with their BFAs and everything. I wish I could make more money. I wish I could be successful. And be like, oh, I did it. I still kind of do it. Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
I maybe talked to like 30 of them, and they seemed really interested. We had conversations. I was like, oh, here's what you have to do. Here's how much money. I went right down to brass tacks. Here's how much money I started out with. I started out with $2,000 to invest in equipment. That's it.
Yeah, because you're going, that's baseline. You're going to need the equipment.
Go on eBay, get the equipment, and that also included your startup marketing costs. But if you don't know how to do marketing, you can waste a lot of money marketing.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You can just throw it into a hole, basically, if you're not investing properly in good marketing.
So I was like, here's what I did, $2,000, $2,500. Here's what you got to do. And in the years that I spent with this company, guess how many of these kids, some of them not much younger than I was when I started my company, guess how many of them went ahead and tried it?
I'm going to guess 0.
0. Yeah. So there's something to be said for somebody that has the balls, or maybe it's a little brain damage that we don't remember, that gave us the ability to throw caution to the wind and try to create something when there's nothing on the ledge except for us and our own resources. There's the shame of failure, and there's all the money that you just lost.
And I think that the combination is you had enough resources and you had enough ability to sit there and get that.
Just enough resources.
Oh, sure.
Just
I'm not painting it out as like, obviously you scrimped and saved to have those resources because that was your plan to sit there and do that.
Exactly.
So that was a way that you saw of investing in yourself to sit there and continue to make more money in a different paradigm where you were the boss and you could control it.
And you have to take risks.
You had faith in your ability that you were going to be able to do it as good or better than the people who you were working
for.
And with something like photography, it's like, yeah, a couple of $1,000s in equipment, get started. I mean, it's like, what Jeffrey sat there and said,
my art tutor?
Yeah, his one of his earliest painting teachers sat there and told him, if you ever need money as a visual artist, buy a camera.
Because people pay way too much money for pictures. And he told me that story. So when I got out of school, I was like, nobody wants to hire me to paint anything. I'm going to go buy a camera. And that's exactly what I did. I got my first job in photography when I was barely out of school.
Oh, yeah, just out of high school, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I did. But not everybody has the balls, and not everybody has the temperament to be a risk taker. So the side of labor is obvious.
Oh, yeah, because that's a no-brainer.
No-brainer.
Because they're being exploited to a certain extent.
Here's what I think happens. People who are born with money or who have access to tremendous amounts of capital in order
Let's just say are born with access.
Born with access. Perfect. To tremendous amounts of capital.
Or even networking abilities and stuff.
Access.
Like if you're
yeah. You're right. Yeah. I like the way you said it better. Simply access.
Yeah. People who are born into positions of inherited access.
And then they do something, and even if it's like the 6th time before they do something successful, they didn't feel any of the pain of their failure.
Because their ass isn't really on the line.
Their ass isn't on the line. So once they do something that's successful, they're like, look how great I am. I deserve everything I'm getting, and nobody who I'm hiring deserves shit. They should be grateful for what I'm giving them. And then all the workers have that really shitty, uneducated, it almost seems foolhardy or foolish thing that they say, well, he wouldn't be making any money without me, without realizing that there's 10 more people lined up in back of you ready to take your position.
Well, and that's been one of the big complaints at Amazon is that they work their workers, like their workers walk over like 30
dogs.
Hours a day.
Like dogs.
Or 30 miles a day, sorry. Walk over 30 miles a day.
They work 30 hours a day?
Yes, they work over 30 hours a day. They walk over like 30 miles a day. And there's so many people who are just waiting to get those jobs because in a lot of areas where those warehouses are, that's the only decent paying job.
Centers,
the distribution centers is the only
decent paying job. I know. So I think there is definitely a disconnect between labor, the hands that build, and creativity, the people who create these structures, which is called technics.
Well, and it's
having an idea and then being able to build a structure to support that idea is called, I believe, technics. And that takes a special skill. It takes a lot. There's a learning curve to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Because there's a lot of logistical things that unless you really can wrap your head around it, there's a lot of things you're not even going to think of.
Sure. Human nature, for one.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, I pay people this much. They should be happy to get. Well, maybe you need to pay them less and show them some other benefit, or maybe you need to pay them more to get the right people. Like salespeople make incredible amounts of money.
But it's because they're considered to be generating capital because they're selling.
Exactly.
That's the entire thing. So a
And
salesperson,
they're essential.
yes, because that's
You can have a shitty product, and if you have great salespeople, you'll make a shitload of money.
Exactly, and they don't care who manufactures it.
Right.
That's not important to them.
What matters to them is making the sale.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to bring up. I told you about the Monopoly thing, right? Where they did a social experiment on some people.
I don't know.
Okay, so there was an experiment that they sat there and did where they paired people off to play Monopoly against each other. And the experiment started off with them flipping a coin.
Oh, yeah. You did tell me about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so whoever won the coin flip, A, got double the money when they started the game, and then B, every time that they passed go, instead of getting $200, they got $400.
Which is a pretty accurate representation of being born with access.
Exactly. And
Right.
so what ended up happening was the behaviors, because they weren't told what the experiment was testing. They were just like, hey, you're just going to come in here and play Monopoly.
Right.
And so what ended up happening is they started noticing behaviors in the people who had the advantages, where they would start moving around their piece around the board more aggressively and slamming it down on places.
Yep.
They sat there and there was a bowl of like snacks that was in the middle of the table. They started taking more and more of the snacks as they kept doing better and better. And at the end of the experiment, they questioned everybody, and obviously the people who won the coin flip almost invariably won. And so when they were asked what they thought made them win, almost none of them brought up the coin flip.
They talked about their own strategy.
Yes, they talked about their strategies and, oh, well, I bought up these properties so that I could sit there and get these hotels up quicker and all of this. So they attributed it
completely to their own skill and foresight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's very strange. So I think that definitely creates a huge disconnect. And Joe Rogan, I think, says it a lot. Says, hey, man, as close as we come to an even playing field, that's great. But you do also have to consider that nobody starts from the same point.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to look at life as a race, nobody starts from the same point. We all start at different points. It doesn't matter how fast you run. If somebody's 3 laps ahead of you when they start, you lose. You lose, motherfucker. You're done.
I forget what the context was, but I was listening to a legal podcast that I listen to sometimes, and a judge had sat there and made a ruling on something, and they sat there and they brought up like that inequality is baked into the American way. The system doesn't work without inequality. But they were using that as a point, like that I think it was something to do with one of like the lawsuits that Trump had done about the election or something.
Okay, go ahead.
And they sat there and they were like, but the relief that you are asking the court for, they were like, would sit there and strip away, to such an extent that it's like, we can't do that. Like that, like, yeah, everybody, we have to deal with a certain level of inequality in order for the system to actually be fair. It just can't be prejudiced inequality, if that makes sense.
It can't be equality of outcome, but it has to be equality of opportunity.
Well, actually,
and that's why affirmative action things, legislations, whatever people may think about them, I have mixed feelings. In concept, they're fair, considering not everybody starts at the same point.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's trying to make up for that as a concept. How it's utilized, I have mixed feelings about.
Well, and that's the entire thing, is that when, like, a lot of libertarians and stuff like that, they're very much more on the side of, like, we need less government, less laws, people need more freedom, more self-governance.
Sure.
And I do agree with them to a large extent.
Conceptually.
Yeah, conceptually.
I agree with communism conceptually.
Well, yeah, sure.
I also agree with capitalism conceptually.
Yeah, exactly.
But in practice,
everything's fine in concept.
In practice, they all have huge flaws.
And that was actually what I was driving toward, is that it's not about having more laws, it's about having better laws and well-worded laws that actually do what they're supposed to do, instead of leaving the floor open for people to exploit them.
Sure. And and I agree. So because we are getting on a little bit of a
Oh yeah,
tangent.
we've gone off the rails.
We went off the rails a little bit, but it was a good conversation. So let's end it on the reason why laws will never be well worded is because
they don't want them to be.
They don't want them to be because they want to know the loopholes and you don't.
Exactly.
And that's why what'd you call it? Inequality or whatever is baked into the American system.
Yeah.
You didn't say inequality though. You used a different word.
I forget what I used.
Okay, but anyway, yeah, it is. I mean, and especially because our concept of currency is based on debt.
Yeah.
Logistically, it's based on debt. You have to have the haves and the have-nots in order for that system to work. That's the only way debt currency works.
Well, it's the same thing when people talk about like what causes inflation and stuff like that. It's like inflation's an incredibly complicated concept.
Sure.
Because the people at the top will be like, oh, well, we need more unemployment. The people at the bottom are like,
ooh, don't bring that up yet. That's not in the show.
I gotcha.
Okay.
But it's one of those situations where even if you look at those paradigms, different people are pushing for different solutions because from their vantage point, what they're vying for are different things.
Yeah.
And again, the inability to see each other's perspective in order to come up with some kind of mutually beneficial situation.
The human race, the way I see it, because they're strange and confusing to me. I never was one. Is they're basically a bunch of hairless half monkeys that will decide to push for whatever in their own vested interest, and then they will come up with a logical or moral excuse for why they're doing what they're doing after the fact.
Yes, it's definitely.
They don't decide what they stand for
of humanity
first. There's no morality a priori. It's, this is in my best interest. Here's why it's right.
Or here's why I am the exception to the rule that I want you to follow.
Well, all the elites do that. Yeah. Hey, listen, man, I fly on my private jet all the time, and I also think the rest of you need to die because you're taking up space. That was a little bit of a non sequitur. Sorry. But anyway, that's the way I feel.
No, I got it.
So as far as the meme goes, where these new companies that are taking all of the capital out of the economy, they're basically run by middle management types. It's just a distribution of labor.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That's all it is.
That's all it is it's connecting people who are owners and shareholders with people who can generate revenue. And it's just all being run by...
Well, in all fairness, the people that are creating these corporate structures are connecting the laborers with the market.
Sure, because they're technological structures.
Yeah. Exactly. But they don't actually produce anything.
Yeah, because you used to have to, to take Uber, for example. It's like what you used to have to do is you used to have to sit there and, okay, I want to run a taxi company.
Right.
So it's like I need a capital investment to sit there and I need to
buy a bunch of cars.
I need to purchase insurance for them. I need to hire dispatchers.
You got to have the same yellow paint on every fucking taxi. I think that's a law in some cities like New York.
Yeah, New York actually
color-coded. Yeah. Same paint.
Yeah, because actually, if I recall correctly, I think Uber had a really hard time getting a foothold in New York City.
I remember that.
Because the legislature was really fighting them on
I remember that. Yeah, for sure, because they were protecting the interests that already existed in the city, even though it was completely outmoded by what was being done. Uber's just a better system.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is that when you sit there and think about it from that end of things, it's like, so Uber came in and saw a better way to run an existing market and sat there and swooped in and started dominating the market.
Now, I think that the wonderful way to think about this is that these companies are not created by pioneers. They are actually created by what we all know from the corporate structure and we call middle management types.
Oh, yeah.
What's that type of person? All right, we've all seen the movie Office Space.
Oh, yeah.
The guy sipping his cup of coffee. I know mine looks like a skull, but he's got the suspenders and the glasses, and he goes,
Gonna need you to get those TPS reports.
Gonna need you to get those reports on my desk as soon as possible, preferably before lunch. They're already on your desk, sir. Yeah, just get those to me, please. That's the middle management type. That guy didn't create shit.
Yeah, exactly. They're just somebody who's taking orders from above and disseminating them to below. They are a facilitator.
Now, what happens if that type of person starts a company? I'll start you off. First thing that happens, they're not creating anything. They're going to take a pre-existing idea and figure out how to capitalize on it with doing the least amount of work possible.
And I think the funny thing is that technological revolution, when like Net 2.0 came out, basically, when you started getting like YouTube and all of this other stuff,
Right?
and, you know, Google started becoming like this huge powerhouse and everything. It's really funny because if you look at a lot of the companies that turned into these giant multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies, it was just X but online. Elon Musk, PayPal. Oh, it's a bank, just online.
Right.
Amazon, it's a bookstore, just online.
Yeah.
You know, that's all it was.
Yeah. And anybody remember when Amazon was a fucking bookstore?
Yeah.
You couldn't even download the books.
No, yeah.
You just
were
ordered
literally
books
ordering
online.
books. It was
Because,
made
dude,
mostly to facilitate college kids.
I wanted a fucking book, a specific book. I had to drive around at like 8 different bookstores before maybe I found it.
Yeah, or
Maybe
you'd
I
have to
found
get on the phone on the old landline and sit there and dial every Barnes and Nobles you could find in the phone book. Hey, do you have this in stock?
And sometimes they'd say yes and they'd be wrong, and you just wasted gas.
Yep.
Oh, it said in the computer it was that. Yeah, well, somebody stole it then, motherfucker, or maybe you didn't put the sale through. You know, like something happened.
Yeah,
It's not there.
Wrong UPC got scanned, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not there. So, I mean, anybody remember when Amazon sold physical books?
Yeah.
That's all they used to do.
Look at Netflix. It was just
DVDs.
Blockbuster, just online.
Blockbuster online. We're
Yeah.
going to mail you a DVD. Whenever you're done with it, you mail it back. I'm sure it's in great shape.
Yeah, and that subscription model is another thing that like really took over too, because
Sure.
everybody realized that by just having that residual income, like where everybody's just like, because that person could hold on to that DVD for 6 months. They're like, whatever, just keep paying your. Well, at the time, it was like $8 a month.
Now, if you think about a corporate structure, the person who created that structure in a purely ideologically perfect capitalist system is the creator. I have an idea that's going to make other people's lives better or easier, and then I'm going to build the structure to support that idea, and we're going to hire people to fill in the blanks in that structure.
Yeah.
That's great.
No, I got you.
Now, middle management types, they're the people that are answering to a yes man, and
Well, are yes men to those other people.
or yeah, they're being yes men to their overlords, you know, the creator, and
Whatever you say, boss.
and managing the labor and getting a huge power trip out of doing it. So there's something within a corporate structure that you brought up. I put a name on when we had the conversation about this. The name is the Peter Principle. So if we imagine that these corporations like Uber and things are actually built by middle management types, why do you think this is so fucked up? Because it's really based on the Peter Principle, isn't it?
Well, what is the Peter Principle again? Because you keep using that more than I do.
Oh, well, when we had this conversation, you were saying, well, if you think about a corporate structure, everybody is kind of out of their depth because you get promoted.
Okay, so then that's the Peter Principle?
That's the Peter Principle.
Okay.
So if you are really good at your job, you will get a promotion.
Yeah.
But you might not be too good at that job. But generally speaking, you don't get demoted. You're just not not great at the job that you got promoted to, but you can still do the thing before that you did really well. That's the Peter Principle, that everybody is just slightly out of their depth.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that was actually what that, because I know you kept throwing that around, but I didn't actually know what that phrase in particular meant.
So you actually brought this up when we first had this conversation about the meme, where these corporate structures seem to be created by middle management types. They're not creating anything. They just found a way to facilitate labor and suck capital out of the economy. And, they're all the type of people that are just slightly out of their depth. So if you think about being middle management, here's a little promotion for you. Run a fucking company without somebody who created something. A little bit out of your depth.
Yeah, exactly. and yeah, that whole thing is with getting promoted one step beyond your ability. It's just, it's the natural structure thing. You get rewarded by your employers, provided they actually do that these days, because in all honesty, most companies now just do outside hires and stuff like that. So you're actually to my mind, seeing it a little bit less these days, but with the workforce being so expansive, it's like you've just got all of these people who are just trying to look like they're doing their jobs because that's all they need to do.
That's all they need to do.
And they'll pull down a 6-figure salary.
That's called gold bricking.
Yeah, and it's just like, hey, you know, like, I was like, you know, let's say you were an IT person or something like that, and you get promoted to like project manager.
I think we happen to know one of these people personally.
Well, that story is even crazier because that person that we know was the receptionist at the company where she worked.
Was she?
And she found out that there was an opening in the IT department, and with I think she had a degree in business management or something like that, like from college. She had like her bachelor's in business.
I think other than a BFA, that's probably the easiest degree to get.
Yeah. So and she's just like, oh well, I'm interested in this job. It's a shame I'm not qualified for it. And basically, like, because her bosses like, oh, you work well and everything. So it's like she gets promoted to an IT position, an IT management position. And basically, like, they provided her training that just told her, like, the bare minimum.
What to do.
Just the bare minimum of what she had to understand. Yeah. And so, like, now you work from home. Or in this person's case,
she travels quite a bit.
Basically on permanent vacation.
She goes everywhere in the world, and all she has to do is lug around her laptop and make sure she has good Wi-Fi access, and she can do her job. And she's making
and
like a good 6 figures, like not like super low.
Yeah, like I think like 120K or something like that.
Oh, that's super low.
I mean, but
that's it. I thought she was.
It might be more with bonuses. I don't know.
Okay,
but the point is that like so it's just, and I think she only has to really work like maybe 2 hours a day. And it's like, that's just wild.
Now listen, I'm not a hater.
Oh no, I am very happy for her.
And I want to know how I can get the same thing she has.
That's where I'm coming from, is like, I wish I was a cute girl.
Running the New World Order is difficult. And I am a trans man. I was thinking about, just watch my YouTube apology video, you'll understand this. I'm thinking about detransitioning and maybe going for that. Do you think that's an option at this point?
I don't think you'd be a cute girl.
Yeah, not at my age.
You're too old. You gotta strike while the iron's hot.
I've gone too far.
Yeah.
I did the beard and everything and the low-hanging nuts that dip the toilet water when I sit down to take a shit. It's going to be difficult to get rid of all that.
Just go into the bathroom with a ladle. It works for me. You just scoop them up from between your legs.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
hold them up.
Good stuff.
Yeah, because I feel like I have to shower every time I take a shit.
Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
And yeah. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you have a special ladle for that, or do you use the same one that you use when you cook?
So you need like one of the ones that you use for like wontons or dumplings so that the water like filters out of it.
Not what I asked.
Oh, sorry, what?
Do you use a special ladle for that, or do you use one of the same ones that you use when you cook?
Oh, I missed the last part. I was just
because I'm not eating over your house anymore.
Well, at least not the wontons.
I need a very specific answer. So you asked her once.
Yeah,
because you're curious because she's making like a whole bunch of money.
Oh yeah,
she doesn't seem.
And I'm a technically minded person, so it's like, oh, that could be a field that I could get into.
I was gonna say the reason why I would have asked her, and you don't have to say it. I'll say it. I don't think she's that bright.
Oh, my point is that when you ask somebody to describe what they do for a living, and
you expect the elevator pitch,
the response that you get instead is, well, you can borrow the books that I have sometime if you want, because I don't really know how to explain it.
Is that she said the second part? I don't really know how to explain it?
Something to that effect. I don't think it was that direct.
Woo! All right.
But yeah, just something to that general effect, I believe, was the response to that.
Peter Principle.
Yeah.
That's chilling. Now, how long do you think before AI takes over her job?
I mean,
because all she does is upload security patches and then test those patches from outside sources that are pre-programmed to attempt to hack the security system according to what they have found in new viruses and Trojans. So it's just running protocols.
No, you're wrong.
I thought that's what she did.
No, that's what her employees do.
Oh, she's in charge of the people that do that.
She's in management, yes.
Oh, the plot thickens.
So no, it'll never go away as long as they need employees. Her job, and if all the employees left, she would probably be put into the one thing that would probably terrify her most, is because then she would have to understand what she was doing because she would be in charge of running those AI. So as long as they still have physical employees doing that, her job's fine.
Here's when you know somebody is absolutely useless in a corporate structure. Give them a whole bunch of money, theoretically.
Theoretically. Okay.
Give them a whole bunch of money and say, hey, go start your own business doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they can't do it, they shouldn't have their job.
Mm.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's an easy litmus test anyway.
Yeah. I mean, if you're that high up on the ladder and you can't start that company for yourself, you have no business being there.
Yeah, and I think that it's actually a telling thing in a couple of ways because, you know, let's say you were one of those people who worked under her. And so you know what the work is. It's like if you got a bunch of money and somebody sat there and said, start your own company, if you in any way understood what it was you were doing, what would be the first thing you would do? You'd hire somebody who knows how to do the part of it that you don't know how to do, which is the managerial end of things, and you'd start from there.
Yeah, go build a team.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you do when you start a sales force. You get the best salesperson you can find, and
you
say,
have them build a team. Yeah.
Go hire people.
Mm.
You now have hiring and firing power.
Yeah, and that's what I would do in a situation like that. If somebody gave me money, the first thing that I would think is like, I'm probably going to need an accountant, you know, because I'm not going to be able to do that for a company, you know.
So the scary thing with these companies that offer no products, no services, and basically just connect labor with customers is that these middle management types are actually starting companies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And they're just like, oh, well.
And they're successful.
And I think it's just because technology has gotten to the point where there's a lot of things that you don't have to know how to do as long as you can afford the technology, you know?
It's pretty amazing. That's the beginning of AI right there. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Now, what we're actually talking about here is the gig economy. And one of the points that you wanted to bring up, which I think is an important point, is how people are trading security for freedom and how that's affecting our economy and our culture overall. But let's take a quick break and then we'll talk about that for a little bit.
Alrighty.
All right. I gotta pee. So we're back. I had to take a tinkle.
Tinkle break.
So people who are trading freedom for security, I think Benjamin Franklin had some things to say about that.
Oh yeah, what was it? If you'll shit, what is it? If
people who trade freedom
for security deserve neither.
Deserve
right?
neither. Yeah, something along those lines. So that's kind of what the gig economy is offering labor. You can work your own hours. You can work as much or as little as you want. Some of these jobs, as far as untrained labor go, pay relatively well. There was a dark period back in my past where I was shopping for groceries for people on a certain app, and I was making $200 a day, and I only had to work 6 hours. Eventually, it dried up, but I was doing that. $200 a day? It's a living.
Well, that's the whole thing, is it creates this disconnected and mobilized labor force that pretty much runs autonomously, and there's no layoffs because when the work dries up, it just dries up. There's no, like...
You just don't have work.
Yeah. And the whole thing is, though, they're either taking the service fees from the user, or they're sitting there and they're taking 30, like, you know, even if you look at online companies like what do you call it? Shopify and stuff like that. Like, just if you're trying to start like an online business, they're like, oh, let us manage your cart. We'll just take 30% of all your income.
Sure.
And it's
or if you start an Etsy store, it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they basically what has become the new job creators aren't job creators, they're platform creators. And it offers
right. So it's democratizing access to customers. Once again, it's all about access. And I see that personally, I see it as a pro.
I think it can go either way, and I'm going to oddly tie this into politics, but not in any kind of like really political way. But there's a reason. Okay. No, just in like the concept of what our nation was created on, because there was a large and robust debate when they were deciding on what the Constitution was going to entail as to whether or not we should be a democracy or a republic. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we ended up in between is because they understood that going too far in either direction tilted power either too heavily to the people or too heavily to the government. So being a republic was something that you needed to have the overall national security, like things like a standing army and representational democracy and stuff. It made the machine work better as the machine got larger, because you could only really have a pure democracy at that point because of technological limitations on small scales. You know, whereas now I almost wonder if it would make more sense for the country to go more toward democracy away from republicanism, and not republicanism, capital R, lowercase
Republic.
R. Yeah,
right. Because technology gives people access. You could vote for anything online. Hey, man, you want to solve the abortion debate? I got 2 ways we can solve that. One way's not pretty, the other way sounds pretty good.
But the other thing that you end up with that, though, where it gets kind of dangerous, is you get things like Brexit, because they sat there and they put out a referendum because they punted the question to the people instead of the government to make the question of whether or not they should leave the EU more democratic, because they were expecting the people to vote no.
I'm not familiar with Brexit.
We don't need to get into it, but it was this whole dipshit thing that their government did, from what I understand it, where like there was a large faction of people who wanted to leave the European Union and a large faction of people who wanted to stay.
Right.
And because the people in the position of governance didn't want to look bad by making a stand on it against leaving Brexit, or against leaving the EU, they were like, we'll throw it to the people and they'll vote not to leave the EU, and then we won't have to deal with it. And the people fucking voted to leave the EU. And all of a sudden they had no plan on how to do that. But anyway.
Oh, because they just didn't expect it to happen.
Yeah, they were not expecting that vote to go that way.
All right. Yeah, I mean, you know, for a hot button issue, just like, let's say, abortion or gun rights, if you wanted to just say, hey, everybody vote online, as long as you can make sure that system wasn't corruptible, like the voting machines.
Don't do that. You'll get sued for $1.6 billion.
Or at least taken off of YouTube. Then, you know, you could have everybody just vote once and for all. Do it every 10 years. You're like, hey, maybe the opinion of the country's changed. Last time they voted no abortions. This time they vote, yay, we want abortions. And let me make it perfectly clear, as far as political agendas go, I have no skin in the game. I've said this once and I'll say it a million more times. I believe in the right to carry guns, and I believe in the right to kill babies. I'm for both of those things. Carry guns and kill the babies. So I'm in everybody's camp. I got your back.
Carry guns, kill babies. Hatman 2024. But anyway.
So, I mean, you could solve it with that, or you could solve it with mandatory sterilization, one or the other. Well, I mean, hey, you know, there you go.
I feel like we were doing that until Hitler made it that look like a lot
You
worse.
feel like we were doing that, or were we doing that?
Oh, no, I know we were doing
it. Yeah, so Hitler's eugenics program, that brilliant thing that turned into World War II, guess where he got the inspiration from? These guys, the good old US of A. Not a lot of people know that.
We had a very robust eugenics system, and we were handing out mandatory sterilizations to undesirable people, etc., etc. And then Hitler was like, "Hold my beer."
Pretty much. Exactly. He's like, let me show you guys how this is done. I have a solution.
Yeah,
and it's final.
Yeah, very final.
But yeah, I mean, you could set up everything for a democratic vote, but the reason why it never happens, even though we now have the technology to govern over 300 million people, is because they want to continue to use it as a political football.
That's
Obvious.
exactly. Yeah,
it's so obvious.
It's because because
the uniparty wants to make it look like there are two sides, and they want to put you into a camp. Are you against abortion or are you for abortion? We could solve this issue with a simple, secure online vote once and for all. Do it every 10 years, just like I just said. That's logical. Logic has nothing to do with this. They don't play with logic. You control and manipulate the masses by playing with their emotions, not with logic.
No, and I mean, again, look at Hitler. That was very much just playing on the emotions of the German people at the time.
The carrot and the stick, freedom versus security. So I like the gig economy because it offers people freedom. I mean, you can make $60,000 a year doing something where you don't have to check into an office at the same time every day, where you don't have a boss over you. Is it, hey, buddy, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. You can just work and you can just be like, hey, I do my job. I get it done. I have a 4.9 star rating. I'm good. You know what I mean? I'm making enough money to feed my family. That's all I need.
Yeah.
But there is no security. There's no health benefits.
Oh, sure. If your car breaks down to a catastrophic point, you're fucked.
You're fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is absolutely no security. So, I mean, what do you think the pros and cons of that are? I mean, we could talk about unionized jobs where it siphons off so much of the labor that these companies outsource to other countries. And at the same time, which is security, and at the same time, you can talk about a gig economy where nobody has any stability in their lives. Suicide is rampant. Depression is super high. And nobody knows what's going to happen next month, let alone next year. I mean, that's not good either.
Oh, no. And if you're talking about, like, the good of, like, the royal we as a populace, it's one of those things where it's difficult to, like, all of this is a balancing act. All of it's a situation where you have to have the stability to live your life in a positive direction that is good for you, because it has to be good for you for it to be good for the nation, because the nation is just 300 million yous.
Exactly. And I bring this up. This is a really good point. And this is something where you and I actually agree, where when I talk to most people who tend to lean left, they disagree with me. And I always say, what's more important, the group or the individual? And you just gave me your answer. A group is merely a bunch of individuals.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's a balance. That's why the American experiment has been what it has been.
Exactly.
Is because that's what we had to get away from, was the fact that people are just commodities. People are just groups. And it's like, no, everybody's an individual. There has to be a consensus.
We're so being treated as if we are simply commodities.
That's because there's so many
groups.
of us now.
Yeah, but how can you take 300 million people and so accurately bifurcate it into two camps? It's pretty amazing. At least that's the narrative that we're all fed. When you actually go out and talk to people, you find out that people all have very different opinions. Unless you're talking to Trump supporters like that guy from The Daily Show, who I have some clips on for the next show.
Yeah. Jordan Klepper, yeah.
Yeah, like, that looks like he's just talking to the same person over and over again. Some of them have beards and some of them have tits. But it's like the same fucking person.
But that's what they're driving toward. They want us to all be the same
person. They want that. They want it so bad.
And by they, just obviously meaning people who make their living and make their fortune and drive everything based on
everything
access, like we were talking about.
If you turn everything, every single fucking thing, including a virus, into a political football, you can create the illusion of two camps that you can fall into, so you have some sort of identity and meaning. And I'm not going to get too far in the weeds here. It just seems obvious to me that there is a uniparty that all have the same vested interest.
Oh, sure.
And they create the illusion of a bifurcated system so that you can choose which camp to fall into. Now, it's way too complicated for these assholes to deal with more than two camps. That's why they try to push down any third party so vehemently.
Well,
Go ahead, waste your vote.
Oh, what was the thing from that Jonan Vasquez squee comic where the teacher's telling him about the drugs that they've been slipping into the cafeteria food? Change is slow, so we have to make the people asking for it even slower.
There you go. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. You know, everybody wants change because regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. And the funny thing is that, like, yeah, conservatives, it's in the word conservative. They want change to bring it back from where it's gotten. Progressives want change to push it further toward the future. Mm-hmm. But either way, both parties are fighting for change. And if you're asking for a system to change when the people who benefit from that system
don't want it to
change.
Vested interest and perverse incentives. And I think Brett Weinstein said it best on the Dark Horse podcast, one of my favorite podcasts. He said, I consider myself a liberal, but I would love to live in a country where I would be happy to be a conservative.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the funny thing. And that's why it's like, I'll always say that I'm left leaning. Like my I don't want to call it morality. My state of mind is generally toward progressive ideals.
Call it morality.
Because I think that trying to make a society and time stand still defies the natural order.
Yeah, sure. And then upturning what has created civilization on its head
is destructive. Yeah.
Is destructive to the very thing that brings people together in the first place.
Yeah.
So they're both against the natural
exactly.
order.
It's that's the balance that has to be struck.
But hey, here's another thing. I remember during that whole anti-tobacco campaign, which obviously didn't work on either of us.
Well, sure. It's been working better on kids these days.
Better on kids. They're vaping. In the early 2000s, and I remember seeing this meme online where it had a bunch of animals smoking cigarettes, like a monkey.
Yeah, it looks just as unnatural on you.
Yeah, so the meme has all these animals smoking cigarettes, and at the bottom it says, hey, it looks just as unnatural when you do it. And I looked at it for a second, and I was like, wait a second, so does wearing shoes. The fuck are we talking about here?
Yeah, exactly. Put a monkey in a suit and it's going to look just as unnatural.
Everything about civilization is so-called unnatural. But then everything about the human condition is so-called unnatural.
But the funny thing is, the very fact that we are here and doing it makes it natural.
And I was about to bring that up. There's this excellent line from Pollock, and it's about the painter Jackson Pollock, who basically was a pioneer.
That was what Ed Helms, I think, played him or something like that.
The baldy guy, yeah. He was a pioneer in abstract painting to the point where there was no visualization. He invented what's now called splatter painting. But he was doing this one painting in the scene in the movie, and it's a great scene. And he's painting, but he has the brush back on the canvas. And his girlfriend walks into the studio, and she's tearing it apart. And she's, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And she looks at another canvas that he's working on. He's trying to move away from her. He's trying to focus on his work. And she looks at the one he's working on now. She goes, Jackson, you're moving back into imagery. You're moving back into nature. Or no, she says the opposite. You're moving away from imagery. You're moving away from nature. And he looks at her and he goes, I am nature. And she goes, I don't know if that works. He throws the brush on the ground and says, you fucking paint it. But I always love that line.
Yeah.
I am nature.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, everything that we do, there's nothing outside of nature. There's no such thing as the supernatural. There's no such thing as really artificial. All artificial means is man-made with the godlike ability that, hey, guess who granted us? Nature.
Yeah.
To create things out of nothing or out of what we can see on the earth.
Well, even just to conceptualize something that doesn't in any form exist yet.
Exactly. Ex nihilo. Creation ex nihilo. Out of nothing.
Yep.
And that's what the alchemists consider to be the true godlike power. Why they say man is made in the image of God, because we can create something, even just in our minds, out of nothing. We created the concept of the perfect circle. Try to find one in nature. Even if you can see the planetary bodies in all their glory the way that we can now, and they couldn't back then.
Yeah, they're like oblique spheroids. And
they're
stuff
not
like that.
perfect spheres. Yeah. So there is no such thing as a perfect circle. We created that concept ex nihilo without evidence, out of nothing.
And the funny thing is it's an impression that was created on us. Because when you think about it, we were talking on one of the other podcasts about if you asked a kid to draw a car.
Yeah.
So it's like, but that's the funny thing is like, basically the concept of a perfect circle is like something where we saw things that were round. And we were like, well, how do we make perfectly round things? And we fucking did the math to sit there like fucking pi.
Which comes from the concept of a perfect circle.
Yeah,
you can't have that equation without the concept of a perfect circle. All of our abstract mathematics today are based upon Euclidean geometry.
Yeah, and it's just super funny to like sit there and think about like that's the same thing as that child creating an impressionistic drawing of a car as a triangle with two circles on it. It's like, you know, the perfect circle was just some dude who sat there and looked at the sun and was like, oh, that's round.
Yeah, pretty much. Let's see if I can make a better one of those.
I bet I can round better than God.
But conceptually,
yeah.
I mean, if you do actually look at the sun, not so much.
No.
Maybe if you look at the moon, but it's always gibbous or... You know what I mean? It's never perfectly...
The reason why it's never perfect is because their compositions are in flux. I mean, even the core of the Earth moves around all the time, so it's going to have different compositional attributes, which are going to cause different levels of gravity, even if they're minute.
We all stand on the shoulders of giants when we create. We all do.
Yeah.
But the original creators stood on the shoulders of nature, so therefore there is nothing that's technically unnatural. It's just what we have done with it. And... I think Anton LaVey said it best. The best judge of the evolutionary characteristic of a person, how far advanced they are, is not what they can do, but how much they can do with what they have.
Yeah, yeah.
And human beings have surpassed, in my opinion, as far as I know, all other creatures on this planet with that. But
except for dolphins and mice, Douglas Adams.
Maybe. Douglas Adams liked mice?
Douglas Adams was the guy who created Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He said that humans were actually the third most intelligent creature on Earth.
Mice are in there? I didn't know mice were in there. I knew the dolphins were like,
no,
the mice fish and they fly into space.
Yeah, so it was humans think that they're the most intelligent creatures on Earth, but in fact, they're the third most intelligent creature on Earth. And the dolphins think that they're the most intelligent creatures on Earth, but they're in fact the second most intelligent creatures on Earth.
So mice are actually I don't remember that.
According to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Earth was made as an experiment by mice.
That's awesome. I love that so much.
So and the joke of that whole thing is that when we're doing our lab experiments on them, they're doing that to experiment on us.
Oh, yeah. I do remember that. Yeah. Yep, I do remember that. But they don't actually fly off the planet, the dolphins.
No, because they actually are invested in the planet because the mice are actually...
They created it.
They created it to sit there and try to find the answer to the universe and everything.
Wouldn't that be fascinating if the gray aliens are actually just the astral projection manifestation of field mice?
That would be funny.
They both have those oblong dark eyes.
Well, the funny thing is, if you think about that,
here's what I think a human being looks like.
But if you think about like the oval head structure coming to a point, that's basically just looking down at a mouse head.
That's true. That's true.
So,
with the big black eyes.
Yep.
Yeah. That's funny. I love it. So getting back to I don't know, man. Freedom or security with the gig economy. When I did it, I enjoyed it. As soon as it dried up, obviously that was displeasing that there was no recourse unless you have like afterlife, but that's only for like, injury and shit like that. You have no recourse. You have to find something else now before you go through your savings. Yeah. There is nothing.
There's nothing else. Yeah. There's not like, I can get this.
And I don't even think in most states you can collect unemployment benefits if you're 1099, right?
I am actually not entirely sure how. You'd have to pay into it. So I guess the question is were you paying into the unemployment insurance on a 1099?
I don't remember. I have people to take care of that.
Because that's what unemployment insurance is. You pay into it and then you can pull out of it when you need it.
Yeah. I don't remember. It's tough though, man. Well, let me ask you something. If you had the option, because I mean, when I started my own business, I chose freedom over security. And then when I decided, hey man, I need to take some time and relax and focus on other things, I there chose security once again over freedom. It's kind of like a tightrope act.
Oh yeah, and I would say that it's definitely one of those things that kind of oscillates. It's almost like a sine wave where you have to keep building both in tandem with each other.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's and as far as just economics goes, like, I mean, the economic structure is like such a fuster cluck, you know, of sitting there and trying to balance out what works.
But here's the thing, in the traditional corporate structure, and I think this is where people are starting to feel a certain amount of being jaded, malaise, whatever you want to call it, is becoming evident to people that hard work doesn't guarantee you success.
Oh no, yeah, and especially nowadays because they've actually started like incorporating AI to scrub people's resumes and stuff like that. So the chance of somebody even seeing your resume if you're applying for a job, if you're applying for a promotion, it's like it's to the point where hard work gets you more hard work. Because if you prove that you can do hard work,
right,
there's not a lot of people who can do work. These middle management types, they couldn't do my job.
Right.
Because my job involves actual knowledge and ability.
Right.
Not just saying, hey, this guy told me to tell you this.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, if I'm not there, what are you doing? Like, if I disappear, then how do you make this business work?
You know what? My first thought when I hear you say something like that, my first impression is I come to it from the perspective of a capitalist. I'm saying, wow, that sounds like we're paying a whole bunch of people we really don't need. Let's get rid of that.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm not saying like, we have to secure these people's jobs. I'm like, wait, all they do is tell other people to do what I told them to do? So basically, I could cut them out and just be like, tell them myself, send out a fucking memo.
Well, yeah, with technology being what it is, yeah.
You know, and I think this is something called malicious compliance. If you're in a middle management position, where if the person above you tells you, hey, man, do this, and then you go through with it and make sure it gets done, even though you know that's probably not the best thing.
Well, I feel like the malicious compliance stuff comes in mostly from the bottom to the middle management. Because the people...
Oh, you think that the people on the bottom are practicing what's called malicious compliance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's typically the structure that I see it in, is that you have... Because the owners of the company are looking at the company on paper. And so it's all a numbers game to them.
Well, yeah.
And especially when companies get large and companies just keep getting larger because for whatever reason, we don't do trust busting like we used to back in the days to sit there and make sure that they can't do this kind of crap.
Man, as soon as companies like Facebook stop taking their operation calls from the FBI, you're going to see it happen again. It's just because they work in tandem with each other so closely that it's not going to happen.
It's because they do just enough to keep the government out of their shit.
Yeah, they work with the government very closely. Yeah, exactly.
So
and then
like,
they bring Zuckerberg to Congress or Senate or whatever. They have the hearing and they make a show out of it. It's a dog and pony show. It's WWE, so we can all root for one side or the other. But they all know what's going on. Nothing's actually
pro-Zuck or anti-Zuck. Make your choice now. Vote accordingly.
I mean, hey, are you pro? What was the Twilight thing? What were their names? Are you pro?
Oh, Team Jacob and Team Edward.
Yeah, are you Team Jacob or Team Edward? Are you vampire or werewolf? Which one are you guys? It's fucking stupid. We all know what's going to happen. We all know who she's going to end up with. The government's going to end up in bed with Facebook. That's what's going to happen. We know that. Yeah. We know that.
They've got all of our information. What's the government going to do without it?
I mean, Jesus Christ. So, I mean... It's getting obvious to people that working harder is never going to pay off because the better you do your job, they're just going to give you more of that job to do.
Yeah, they'll even like fire people around you who aren't doing their jobs as well and then say, hey,
pick up the slack.
Yeah, exactly. Pick up the slack, same pay, no raises. Sorry. You know, that's coming down from corporate.
Yeah. And then the people at the bottom are getting so fed up that they're just doing what they're told, even though they know that's the wrong thing, and making sure that it doesn't land on their heads.
And the funny thing is, I just realized the middle management is basically like the physical manifestation of the disconnect between labor and job creators. Seriously.
Yeah, good point.
It is. That's
like
what
that.
it is. Middle management is the physical manifestation of the disconnect between job creators and labor.
Yeah.
Because when you sit there and you think about how this is working, because you've got the people at the top at this point, because these companies are so large, it's not like a guy who like owns a mom and pop store or something like that. Because it's like we talked about before. It's like when Sam Walton started Walmart, he was just fulfilling the needs of his community. He was just a guy who was sitting there and he was like, hey, I live in this rural area in Arkansas. I'm going to sit there and make this business that brings all of these products together that these people need in one convenient place, because nobody wants to spend all of their time going around to all these different stores to get this different shit. So he creates a paradigm that sits there and is like, that's a singular individual who's looking at the needs of his community. That turns into this giant fucking juggernaut of a company because it was a good idea. But now the people who run Walmart, they don't care about they're just looking at spreadsheets.
Sure.
They're looking at profit loss reports. They're looking at all of that shit. And it's like, that's how corporate structure has to work at this point, because everything is so large.
Well, I think that's part of the organic structure of any living thing. It's born, it grows, it flourishes, it decays, and it dies.
Yeah, and then but what you end up happening is so like now that's the brain now that's like, okay, this is how theoretically this works. Mm-hmm. And then at the bottom you have all the employees who know what it takes to make the ground operation create those numbers. Mm-hmm. But the people at the top see those numbers as absolute. Like, we're following these trends. Oh, look at this sales are down this percent, close this amount of stores. It's like,
sure,
they're just sitting there and they're just looking at it as a purely, it's theoretical. Mm-hmm. At the top, the job is completely theoretical. At the top, this job is completely theoretical. It's like Walmart only exists on paper to the CEO. It's not actual stores and people anymore.
Right.
And then to the people who actually work in the stores and everything, they know what it takes to make that business actually run, the physical logistics of it. Mm. And middle manager is just there to convince the people at the bottom that the paper is right and they're wrong.
Right. And that's where you have management types and stockholders just gutting companies for profit.
And and
that's basically the death throes of a company. I mean, that's what it takes. I mean, you just gut it for everything that it's worth. See how long you can keep it going while you gut it, and then eventually it dies.
Well, that's when it goes into insolvency. Before that, there's this whole other crazy thing that happens where you've got these investment firms like Blackstone and BlackRock, whatever all the black things are, sit there and like...
I think it's BlackRock. I could be wrong.
I think both exist, actually.
Oh, okay.
I think there's like two different investment firms, but you get these hedge funds. And what they'll do is they'll actually buy smaller companies and conglomerate them into packages and sit there and get the people who work for the companies to push profit percentages up as much as they can. Keep bringing because their only goal...
a quarter after quarter, you have to show an increase. Or at least fiscal year after fiscal year. You have to show a growth.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're not doing your job.
Yeah, but the funny thing is they're not doing it because they care about the company or want the company to work. They don't care if it works or not. They just need the paper part of it to work.
The numbers.
Because their only goal is to sell it to another hedge fund for a profit. And that's going on nonstop.
Well, that's going on with the real estate.
Exactly.
Market,
I know so many companies that sit there that are in service industries, real estate. All of this stuff is just these giant hedge funds that are sitting there and just buying everything up, not to own it, to increase its profits and then sell it to another hedge fund
increase
company.
Its perceived value.
Yeah, and then sell it to another hedge company.
Right.
Hedge fund.
Not the actual value, but the perceived
value. The value on paper.
Right. So you can gut a company and then in order to increase its value on paper and then sell an inferior product at a higher price to another investment firm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they're just going to keep making it dumber and dumber until...
Hey, you ever notice how shit in America doesn't work anymore?
Yeah, right?
How shit breaks down real quick. And let's talk about, aside from planned obsolescence, which is obviously a thing, if I can sell you an inferior product at an inflated price and it breaks in a year, then you have to buy a new one. Good for me. Apple was found guilty of that in court. They're putting fucking death software in your phone when the new phone comes out, so your phone stops working. They were found guilty. They were definitely doing that. And you remember back in the iPhone 4 days when I said, Jesus Christ, it seems like every year my phone just stops working.
Yeah, it just keeps getting slower and slower.
And it gets to the point where I can't run these fucking apps anymore. And I said, I think they're putting a kill switch in my phone when it does the updates. And you were like, nah, you're crazy.
I didn't say you're crazy.
I'm pretty sure you didn't think it was happening.
You know what I was positing that it could also be just because they kept adding more and like so much more, exponentially more memory to the phones
you
at that
didn't
time.
think it was happening.
I didn't think it was happening.
And
I will
then-
agree that. I didn't say you were crazy, though.
You made me feel like I was crazy.
Sorry.
All right. But then, hey, guess what, motherfuckers? It's happening.
Oh, no, I hear you.
It's happening.
Yeah.
If you thought your phone was acting funky just before a new iPhone came out and you were like, what the fuck's going on? Because I'm a skeptic and I believe in conspiracies. Both of those things make sense.
Oh, well.
Not on paper, but, you know, if you are me, they make sense in your head. I was like, this is definitely what's happening. And then a few years later, I'm definitely proven right. That is definitely what they were doing.
No, yeah,
That's
I gotcha.
fucked.
No, yeah, that's definitely a screwy thing.
Aside from planned obsolescence, everything's breaking down. Everything's breaking down. Nothing fucking works anymore. And that's probably the biggest reason is because you're just gutting these companies. You're gutting the practical application of the technology and the techniques that are created by the people who had initially thought up these companies so that you can inflate the value and
that's
sell
really
them
what it
to
is.
other
It's not
investors.
increasing the value. It's inflating
The perceived value. Right. You're inflating the value on paper. And then, you know, you have all these people that are fed up because they realize working harder actually doesn't get you anywhere. There's empirical evidence for that now that things are changing so much so rapidly that you can judge it within your lifetime. Oh, nope, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's like, no, the harder I work, I just get more responsibility. No extra pay, no promotions, nothing.
Yeah, nothing. It actually doesn't do you. You're doing yourself a disservice the harder you try.
Yeah, and that's ties back into the malicious compliance. It's like a lot of people are realizing that, and when they get to that point where they feel like they're completely undervalued and people have no idea what they're fucking talking about, are barking demands at them from on high, and it's like, oh, it's like, you think that's how this works? Fine. I will do it your way.
I'll do it your way.
And then the whole thing self-destructs. So they're like, well, what did you do? Exactly what you fucking told me to, you brain-dead jackass.
Before I do this, can you send it to me in an email or a text?
Yeah, get a paper trail. If you're going to do malicious compliance, make sure you have written proof that you did exactly what you were fucking told to.
Absolutely. Now, on the note of American companies that produce absolutely nothing other than facilitating labor.
Yeah, essentially.
Started by apparently middle management types because nothing's being created whatsoever. What do you think would be because I'm kind of for this idea. I want to start a company where I don't have to produce anything and other people work really hard because they're desperate, because there are no jobs that offer security available anymore, which I think is great because the labor pool's huge. There's so many desperate people. It's amazing.
That's actually their complaint right now is they need more desperate people. People aren't desperate enough. No, I know.
You can show that now if you want.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying.
Let's get another episode. Yeah. But I love having so many desperate people. And I think the very first podcast that we did, I talked about how I went on my phone, I hit a few buttons, and then a few minutes later, a very poor person pulled up with beer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's great. Wait, it's warm. And I got very angry. And a few minutes later, a different very poor person showed up with beer that was actually cold. And that's great.
Yeah, it's the American dream.
It's the American dream that I can do that. And I don't have any compassion or empathy for the guy who's delivering it. He should be thankful he has a job. So let's create some companies where we can do exactly that. How can we take advantage of technology to create a corporate structure that creates nothing but takes advantage of desperate people in order to vacuum money out of the economy and put it in my pocket. Let's do it.
All right. Well, you got any ideas to kick off with?
Well, I think it would be a little meta and kind of cool to create a company that actually works in service to these companies that are already started that produce nothing that are so wealthy.
So what service would be a good provision for those companies? Because obviously there's tons of like, you know, like Pipe Drive and things like that. Like there's obviously tons of like software.
I love that software. Or Salesforce, same thing.
Yeah.
I
like
love
things
that
that straight, but
so good.
But yeah, and that's the funny thing though, is like that's somebody's job gone.
Good riddance.
Boom, done.
Good riddance. That's $60,000 a year I get to save. How about this? How about an AI? We'll hire other people to actually fucking make it.
Oh, well, yeah,
it can be based on like ChatGPT. It's basically going to be a language software that these stupid fucking middle management types that are starting all these companies that produce nothing and suck all the money out. Let's give them a software where they can type in their next harebrained idea and the AI will convince them that they're awesome and it's a great idea and they should do it.
I actually
like a digital yes man.
A digital yes man.
Because that's all these people want.
Well, so
that way you can
actually
hire
managers.
You actually
fire the middle managers.
You're hiring a middle manager because you want somebody to tell you how awesome you are and do whatever you say. Let's have AI do that.
Yeah,
you can get the same ego boost because the yes man, you're always going to sit there and go, is he telling me the truth or does he just need a job? Now with AI, you can convince yourself, this thing's smarter than me. And it just told me that my idea is awesome. I am a god. I am a golden god. I think that would sell.
You know what I think we
can't market it that way.
Well,
but that's
obviously.
What it does. It's like heroin. The first taste is free.
Suddenly become addicted to it.
The first taste is free.
I actually think that would be a really funny thing to make in tandem with a second app. Where you could convince those middle management types that they were mentoring people who were just starting out.
Okay.
And instead of actually employing AI in that first app, have those two apps tied together without them knowing it.
Okay.
And that way it's not AI that's answering middle managers, it's other middle managers answering middle managers, but they think it's AI, so they think that it's smart.
So wait, you're talking about creating a social media platform
that nobody knows is a social media platform.
That we don't even have to invest in the AI.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I love it. That's fucking brilliant.
Just have it so that the one set of users sits there and gets a question texted to them because they're in this mentoring program because they're so smart. And they're sitting there like, oh, this guy thinks he should do that. Yeah, you know what? That sounds like a good idea, buddy. Then the guy gets it back from the AI thinks that's a good idea.
Oh my God. Now, how do you convince them that the AI is asking them questions? Because somebody has to answer the question for you to think the AI is telling you that's a great idea.
Well, yeah, that's the person thinking that they're being asked by a young up-and-comer
as their mentor. They
they
think that they're mentoring other people.
Yeah.
And the people asking the questions think that AI is answering
yes.
them. Ego boost all around.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then it can filter out the negative responses automatically.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love it. Oh, that's so insidious.
I think that would be hilarious. Could you imagine, like, just two people, like, sitting there and doing that with each other? And, like, the one's like, oh, this young guy wants my opinion. And the other, oh, this AI thinks I'm smart. And, like, you know,
Ooh.
Just all ego strokes all the time.
I love it. Oh, my God. That is an insidious web to weave. That could work.
It would be very funny, even if it didn't, just as a concept.
Hey, listen, man, you were talking about that Monopoly thing,
Mm.
where the person started out with double the money, and every time they passed go, they got twice as much as everybody else,
Yeah.
but then they just chalked it up to their own skill while they won. You're talking about, we're creating a company that does nothing.
Yeah, literally provides nothing except for a link between two disparate groups of people who are actually the same exact people.
And we're just lying to them about what's talking to them.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a basic social media algorithm. We would have to invest almost nothing to get that done. You'd have to have very simple AI that language captures, that filters out negative comments. That's it. That would be the major investment.
Sure.
$1 billion idea, man.
Well, thank you.
We might have to delete this off the podcast so none of the people who aren't watching can steal this from us. We got to do this.
This is done. Leave.
We need to fucking do this. If we're not actually going to do it, it would be really funny to like create a name for the company and branding for it.
Come on. Well, we need two names for the two apps. So yeah, we'll have to figure that one out.
Two apps that work in oh my god. Oh my god, we're going to have to think about that. That's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I'd be curious just to like get a prototype and just to hand it to two people who we know that would work on, just to sit there and see how they react.
Oh my god, like just as a fucking social experiment between two arrogant people that we happen to know.
Yeah, exactly.
And just watch. It's like watching two robots talk to each other, and you'd be like, "Oh, they started talking their own fucking language now. They've devolved to nothing but pure ego. Holy shit!
Oh god,
they have their own fucking language now. I can't even understand the words that they're using. Me good, you right. Like, what is he saying?
Oh Jesus!
I love it. Oh my god, we got to do that. All right, put a pin in that.
All right, I will put a mental pin in that.
All right. So we have reached that point of the night. Are you ready to invoke the spirit of Alex Jones into your being and give us the info wars? Give us the info that we need to make war upon.
In the words of Reggie Fils-Aimé, my body is ready.
We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to the power of black magic, your lord and mine, Satan, I present to you Alex Jones.
All right, people, friend of the working man and the people who run the business all together, it's me, Alex Jones here, give you more truth about what's going on with us as a society. Now, we're going to read some headlines off here because we got a lot to talk about. Every time we get together here, it's just new insanity. It's just more and more crazy stuff. So right now, what we're looking at here, the World Bank says that the poor need more money because rich nations are being called to task for a crisis. Now, let me tell you this. The poor do not need more money. Poor people are not job creators. You got to understand. We here at InfoWars, we create jobs. We harness them out of the ether. We draw them in like some kind of rays from Jesus Christ himself. Praise Reagan. He's going to sit there, and you got to understand that when the World Bank is saying that poor people need more money, this isn't a crisis. This isn't a crisis of the world. This is a crisis of the World Bank. Now, why do they want to see poor people have more money? I'll tell you. Because the more that they give that money to poor people, less it goes to job creators, the more people get dependent on the government. So if you sit there and you give poor people more money, they're just going to, oh, thank you, sir, may I have another? And where does it stop? Where does it stop? That's the question. All right, what do we got here? Rooms with broken air conditioners are hot. Now, I want to tell you this. If you're rich enough to own an air conditioner, then what's going to happen with you here is that you're going to be able to escape the heat. The heat of what? The heat of hell. And this is why they're sitting there and they're trying to give all this money to these poor people. These poor people don't have air conditioning, but if you don't make them suffer, if they're not feeling the heat of hell, of hellfire on them, they're never going to ascend to anything. Sure, I mean, maybe they were born into poverty. I don't care. That's between them and Jesus to get things right.
Scared straight.
That's what it takes sometimes. Sometimes you need to burn before you can fly, ask Icarus.
I don't think that's how it went.
We don't need to get into that. I'm not litigating myth at this point. It's just facts here.
Just now, Jesus Christ and facts.
Jesus Christ is a fact. Anyway, I don't know why I'm listening to you. This isn't your show. Now, here's a serious issue that we're going to run into as time goes on here. The homeless survive winter. Now what? And that's the question we got to ask ourselves. Maybe they need to move into a tent that doesn't have air conditioning. Because that's what's going on here. You can, of course they survive the winter. They don't have the money for air conditioning. Their rooms are getting hot. It's keeping them warm. You know what they should probably do with these guys? Get them some air conditioners. Sit there and have the World Bank give them some of that money. Let's put some air conditioners in those tents. I'll tell you, they're not going to survive the winter after that. And then it's all cleaned up. You don't even have to worry about it anymore. No more homeless people. Think of all the free tents you can just walk down the street grabbing. I sit there and bring them into an army surplus. We'll sell that stuff. We'll get it going. Speaking of selling stuff, we got to sit there and keep the lights on here at InfoWars. So we're not going to ask you for any kind of pity. We're not asking you for any kind of handout. The World Bank won't give us money because we're not poor.
We asked.
And the entire thing you got to understand about that is when you're not poor and the World Bank doesn't care about you, we've got air conditioning here, so we can't even keep this room warm. There's just no way for us to survive the winter unless you buy some nutraceuticals. Hit me with it.
What we have today, Alex, is Stay Empower.
Stay Empower. Now, let me tell you what this is going to do for you. We take the finest rhino horns, all natural, organic. We grow them ourselves in a field of rhinos in Africa. And we sit there and we get that ground up. I'll tell you, you ask anybody from anywhere in the Eastern world, they're going to sit there and tell you that is pure potency. Because it is the empowered part of an animal going in to empower your animal parts. Now, we sit there and we take that, we grind it up, we put it into a pill form. It's a suppository. I know, sounds gay. But the entire thing is that if you want to stay empowered, you've got to sit there and make sure that you are virile, that you are horny, and you are ready to take it up the ass. What do we got next?
Fuck me.
All right. And now there is a homeless man under house arrest. This is what happens when you let him survive the winter. You can see the through line that's just going through all these stories. You just watch as they sit there and they want to give them money. And they want to sit there and have them buy air conditioners. And sit there and want them to not be hot, but also want them to survive the winter. And you're going to sit there and end up with this situation. What do we do with this man? I'll tell you what we do. We confine him to a small tent that has air conditioning in the winter. And I'll tell you, like that ankle monitor, that's not going anywhere. I mean, it may shut off due to being too cold, but I'm telling you, he'll serve his sentence. He's under house arrest, and you gotta know that they let him off easy. This is what happens when you get these liberals in government. They're sitting there and putting homeless people under house arrest. Whatever happened to the death penalty? You're not going to solve the national homeless crisis unless you reinstate the death penalty.
Oh my
What's next?
God, Jesus.
All right, city unsure why the sewer smells. And I can tell you right now, this title says it all. These liberal cities are full of shit. And they don't even know it. They're sitting there. Oh, why does the sewer smell? I don't know. Where did all those homeless people go? I don't know. Maybe they're in the sewers. Maybe they're mole people. I honestly don't care. The point is that as long as I can't see them when I go through neighborhoods that I have no interest in living near and never come anywhere close to, I just need to know that they're not there in the event that I want. Maybe I want some good Jamaican food. I'm not going to find that in my neighborhood. Why? Because I chose a place to live where there's no Jamaicans.
Stay in power.
Doesn't mean I don't want their food. Doesn't mean I don't want delicious, succulent Jamaican food. I want some oxtail. How am I going to get it? I got to go down to where the sewers smell in these liberal cities. Look at ugly homeless people. That's not going to happen. That's why I sit there. I just use DoorDash. I let them bring that to me. And that's the entire thing, is that's how you stay in power, is to make them, with their labor, bring the goods to you.
Well, I think that's, Alex, I think that that's a message that we can all learn from. And thank you once again for coming to visit us today at the studio. I think that was a powerful message that America needs to hear. And nobody has learned anything, and we're all stupider now for having listened to it.
I took an Uber here.
Thank you very much for watching the New World Order broadcast. And remember, we're watching you too.
Someone is watching. There are strangers